Hello, my name is John Gray, and I'm here to deliver a talk about implementing open science initiatives to promote diverse, just, and sustainable research outcomes. This is presented as part of the Adopting Open Science Practices Symposium. My name is John Gray from Pacific Lutheran University, and this is the 100th WPA convention. The image behind you, the image on the screen, is from the battlefield at Antietam. And if I can think of any example of something that was not valuing diversity, social justice, or sustainability, it was the bloodiest single day of battle in the Civil War. Throughout this slideshow, you'll have imagery, maybe to keep you occupied since we're not face-to-face and you're not surrounded with other people. I have provided you with things to look at behind me, and I have images on the screen that are associated with what I call the Crisis Mice's open science journey. I spent a lot of time thinking about issues related to diversity, justice, sustainability on that, and you were looking at the open science bus made out of the open science badge, and I'm going to talk about DJS first, followed by what areas or facets of scientific transparency I think can help, specifically how we can advance diversity, justice, and sustainability from the crowd, how it can advance diversity, justice, and sustainability from transparency tools. I'm going to briefly mention a DJS lens that we offer for recommendations for evaluating an organization, and then a prediction or a set of predictions for to look into the future. So if you'd like a deeper conversation or about this, if you'd like to see me talk about this in a lot more detail, these two manuscripts are my DJS papers. The one on the left is primarily what I'm going to talk about today, the concepts were presented there. The one on the right, Checking Progress Toward a More Diverse, Just, and Sustainable Psychology, was written to help undergraduates understand DJS and includes some really good metaphors and conceptualizations. So when we're talking about diversity, justice, and sustainability, diversity, I like to say it's about chemicals, culture, and choice. Chemicals being what makes us who we are, the chemicals underlying the skin, who we are as DNA. Culture, where we were raised, and our upbringing, and then choices that we've made, either to identify with a culture or to walk away from a culture, or physical decisions that we make, people that we choose to interact with, and so on. We often describe diversity further by issues related to demographics and identity. So the things that make us who we are: skin color, gender, where we came from, where we were born. But there's also cognitive, which is how people differ in their thoughts. Psychology and other sciences tend to have individuals that are of a certain political perspective. It might be better to have a broader representation in a number of ways. People tend to all assume the same things if they're all coming from the same perspective. So how can we be better? We can have more diverse participants, researchers, even methods and theories. Participants and researchers, we've often heard now, it's become common to talk about weird samples: Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. That is not the majority of people on the planet, but it is the vast majority of science that we conduct. Look at this SIPS cut. Justice is about equity or equality. Do we have access to research opportunities? Do we have publication opportunities? Again, who is invited to be a participant, a researcher? What methods and theories are given fair shakes? Before Scientific Revolution 2.0, as Bobby Spellman called it, we didn't have a lot of value for replications. We didn't have a lot of value for methods type research that was not theory or exciting. And so that's not equitable. Finally, sustainability is about long-lasting or long-term outcomes. In a publish or perish world, we are not valuing the science that we're conducting because we have to get the paper out. We're willing to cut corners and shortcuts in order to get productive papers. whether or not they're later going to be replicable and reproducible. Questionable research practices degrade the longevity of findings, harking, not reporting the outcomes, using more conditions than you report. All of these things decrease the likelihood something will be long-lasting. And finally, often forgotten, we need a planet on which to conduct research, so we need to have sustainable approaches to the question. We need to have questions about sustainability on the planet. Often, when you engage in a conversation with individuals that value diversity, justice, sustainability, or equity and inclusion, they don't talk about all three. And we argue, Gray et al. Argue strongly, that without all three, you don't move forward. So Segezo had this idea of place, permanence, and persons factors. These look a lot like diversity, justice, sustainability to us, so we adapted that, and we're talking about a diverse, justice, sustainable model for psychological science, where we have a place factor and permanence factor, which are two types of justice, and then a persons factor that talks about who and the diversity of the individuals involved. And all three of them are necessary in order to have sustainability through long-term outcomes. So more specifically, when we're talking about diverse research should be more generalizable, because the researchers who are more diverse will ask questions and answer questions in a way that are more knowledgeable of their own culture and they're therefore more lasting. Participants that actually represent the entire population and not just portions of the population will yield results that will be predictive for more of the population and not just portions of the population. Should be generalizable for a longer period of time. And finally, allowing more individuals from a broader range of areas to process or consume that knowledge allows psychology to have better impacts more generally across the culture. Open science enables that by inviting more diverse research questions. The way that we can conduct research in large-scale projects allow for more diversity in research questions. These large-scale projects have broader authorship on high-impact projects. If you look at my H factor, the top scores in my H factor are almost all come from these large-scale collaborative projects. I might be a ... but I still have something that was cited 50 times. And if we engage in open science practices early, it can help students identify as scientists earlier on and keep them in that space rather than discourage them and have them chase other dreams. And that will help diversify our researchers and faculty in time. Think about the place factor, or in a social justice perspective, just research is more accessible. Elitism stifles research competition. New researchers have to balance family and low pay against tenure and promotion. It forces them to take certain opportunities or to not ask questions that are deeper or more important. Institutional racism, of course, hinders access and has hindered access for generations, hundreds of years. And so we also have a situation where certain individuals do not have the same access to the research process as others. How does open science benefit that? Well, when you engage in large-scale projects, you're allowed to share expertise. You don't have to do every portion of the project. And so you get pieces of it where you can be more specialized. Being transparent in the process engenders credit so that people can't don't get their ideas stolen from them by more powerful researchers or get scooped. Access to projects occurs on merit rather than reputation, and access to publications for future researchers allows us to understand our entire science so that we can ask better questions. When we talk about the permanence factor or sustainability, sustainable research should last longer. At the beginning of the replication crisis, we had findings that suggest a low replication rate from traditional models, the RPP, 50%, many labs around 50% across all of them. So not a great reporting standard from traditional methods. Hopefully by identifying what factors do and don't replicate, we can have a better sense of what our science is over time. And weird researchers aren't everybody, and therefore our results are not likely generalized across the planet because we're only being measured in a certain group. Open science enables more production from available resources. If you don't have to do the entire project, more projects can get done with less time from each individual. We now have rewards for engaging in replication science, and therefore more individuals are motivated to ask questions that are about the meta science rather than flashy questions. And the outcome of these large-scale projects is high-quality data sets that can be used for many research questions beyond their initial finding. So primarily when we're looking for scientific transparency, there's two categories that I think of in terms of facets. One is crowdsourcing research projects, or collecting a bunch of researchers together to conduct meta-science or large-scale research. The other is a big bucket, a large set of transparency tools. I won't discuss or describe any of these in a lot of detail, but rather to point at them. So this slide used to be, 5 years ago, I used to say this is the complete list of all the crowd projects that exist. I've stopped trying. There's just too many. I'm looking at this and I see I haven't even mentioned the Network for International Collaborative Exchange, which was one of the projects I helped create. There's just too many to keep up. And so at some point, you just have to start making decisions about which ones to engage in. So if you go back to 2010, there was literally no opportunities for anybody to engage in collaborative research. None. Zero. The CURP, the first one, the Collective Undergraduate Research Project, was the first project for social psychologists for students, or for psychology for students. So you see my bias in social psych. So these were early, but they have certainly been dwarfed by continued ongoing other projects that fill this space. The Psych Science Accelerator is I call it the Psych Accelerator here. I'm sorry there, Chris Chartier, for calling it wrong. The Psychological Science Accelerator, to me, is the one that offers the best promise for professional researchers. I am a strong endorser of the CRAPE and the NICE for student researchers. In terms of a transparent toolbox, we have open science software such as R or JASP that allow us to do data analyses without paying so much money for the software itself. R is very difficult to learn, although there are increasingly places where you can get graphical user interfaces to work it. JASP is it was designed for Bayesian techniques, but it can also do more frequentist models. That is more accessible because it was built with a graphical user interface, and it works R in the background. Online experimental protocols are still something we need more of, but Open Sesame is one. These allow us to offer online research without paying for the expensive proprietary software. I don't know if you know about it, but the PsyChi created a compendium of scales and measures where you can find free scales and measures. Open Science badges also offer more opportunity to engage in free materials. So open materials means that you present your materials that were used in the study in a permanent manner. Open data, which is this badge that I'm hiding with my face, is you can put your data somewhere in permanent access. And pre-registered is when you say, this is what my study's going to do before you do it. These were carrots in terms of trying to engage in more, to encourage more people to engage in transparency without forcing it. There are journals, like the Journal of Social Psychology has started requiring methods transparency, and in January we'll start requiring data transparency. That's more of a stick approach. All of these now are guided by Transparency and Openness Promotion Guidelines, or the TOP guidelines, which have 8 facets that describe areas that you can share transparency in your study: data, citations, materials, pre-registration, replication. So Transparency and Openness Promotion Guidelines were developed by publishers and the Center for Open Science and authors to try to push forward, funders, not authors, to try to push forward transparency, more from a where are you perspective. Journals are asked to do an audit, but then after you've done your audit, to try to push forward transparency from your journal. Reporting standards have changed. We are now expected to report effect sizes and confidence intervals, which allow us to make different types of inferences that aren't based only on the magical P is 0.05 as alpha. Bayesian techniques offer a different challenge to interpretations of longstanding findings. It's not necessarily that there's one answer or solution to how we do analyses better, but the reporting standards that we're expected to tell everything that we did do, all levels of it, certainly will improve it. Finally, a toolbox of online repositories allows us to share things. I'm a big fan of the Open Science Framework. There's also GitHub, Figshare, institutional repositories, where we can document our materials, our data, and so on. If you want to share your paper, maybe become your own publisher, you can put your research on the PsycArXiv, which is a preprint archive service. Now, I challenge that open access journals aren't necessarily part of the transparent toolbox, because they cost so much to publish in that they're not advancing social justice, because only certain people can afford to pay. My colleagues and I, Kelly, Leslie, and Dana, identified these questions, these 10 questions, which we offer as a DJS Lens toolkit. So you can ask if your organization or your project is addressing issues of diversity, social justice, and sustainability. I'm going to spend a lot of time here on this because I hope you'll go read in the book and maybe find us on our OSF page and read it further on your own. We do there have a couple examples of case studies where we've done this too. Okay, so here's my predictions for the future. Here's my predictions for the future. If we have open science, that some people will adopt it, some people won't. And so let's look at that. Let's look at what happens across time. And so first, let's randomly and representatively sample manuscripts from all journals, all 40 years, from 2000 to 2040. That's a lot of journals. I don't know that this is a doable project for me to run. I think it would be something that I'd like to see, and have predictions related to it. Secondly, let's randomly and representatively sample preprints from PsycArXiv from the first year till 2040. That would give you 24 years. It didn't start till 2016. Collectively, you'd have who knows, thousands upon thousands of papers. Then you want to code them for adherence to the Transparency and Openness Promotion Guidelines. To what degree are they meeting transparency and openness expectations? Code the demographics to the information across the diversity categories, so the degree to which they are cognitively, identity, and demographically diverse. Code the distribution and procedures across justice measures. To what degree is the process of conducting research and publishing research, to what degree is that fair? And finally, code outcomes to indicate sustainability. Are questions about human sustainability, are questions about replication addressed? Are the studies replicable? Are the studies reproducible? For procedures, train teams of researchers, many I would assume. Train them to code the manuscript and authors for the diverse justice sustainability variables. Another set of researchers blind to the coding should engage in collaborative results analyses. I expect that if you did this, that open science, individuals that engaged in open science methodology would represent more diverse authors from more regions of the world and for more traditionally disadvantaged groups. In contrast, I offer that individuals engaged in traditional methods are more likely still going to be from centralized authorship, so a few people or top authors, more likely from rich and powerful institutions and countries, and even in 40 years, although decreasingly so just because of demographic shifts overall, more likely from white men. Not exclusively, we absolutely, no doubt, see persons of color and women who engage in elitism. I don't doubt that at all. But in terms of across the population, I think it's more likely that open science will engender and encourage diversity, and that the white men are least likely to want to change. Okay. Secondly, individuals engaged in open science methodology should have broader access. They're more likely to make the data and materials available. They're more likely to have collective leadership. The Psychological Science Accelerator put forth committees rather than individuals to do their research. I think in contrast, traditional methods will have more elitism. They'll use more proprietary materials, more likely to have closed data. We'll have leaders and heroes through reputation rather than through merit. Research findings that are based in open science methodology should be longer lasting, more reproducible with more populations, more generalizable across populations, whereas traditional methods should continue to generate flashy but fleeting, exciting findings that aren't likely to be replicated or are only replicated in very limited parameters. In conclusion, psychology as a discipline seems to value diversity, justice, and sustainability, but we have not always lived up to those standards. Psychological research built on diverse, just, and sustainable outcomes would be better research. Open science should advance diversity, justice, and sustainability. For instance, crowdsourcing projects enables more researchers and participants to participate. Transparency tools enable more people to engage in the dissemination of their findings. And science that embraces open science should be more diverse, just, and sustainable. With that, I'd like to thank a few individuals and groups, specifically Pacific University, Pacific Lutheran University offered diversity, justice, sustainability as grounding principles in their PLU 2020 long-range plan. It certainly stuck with me in 2012. I spent the next 8 years focusing and thinking about that. The Center for Open Science did many of these large projects and tools. They have forever changed the workflow of science and myself for sure. All of the contributors from the CURP, the Psi Beta, Psi Chi collaboration, CRAPE, EME2, EME, and other projects that I was involved in that showed me how to teach, for teaching me how to conduct crowd projects on almost no budget. The Psi Chi Journal for adopting this concept for a special issue and inviting me to be a guest editor. And for Kelly Cuccolo, Leslie Cramlett-Alvarez, and Dana Layton to serve as co-authors on one of my favorite papers that I ever wrote, but one of the most difficult papers I ever wrote on exactly this topic. Thank you for spending time with me today. I do hope that you'll adopt open science initiatives for your own workflow benefit, but I hope you'll convince others to adopt them because I believe that it will advance diverse, just, and sustainable world. Have a good day. I hope to see you in Vegas in 2021, and I wish I was there with you in San Francisco today. All the best.